3:17 a.m. The ICU hummed with machines keeping a dead man breathing. 72 hours since doctors declared him gone. The blonde rookie nurse adjusted his IV when she heard it, a whisper, numbers, coordinates. Doctors called it involuntary spasms. She wrote them down anyway. Those digits triggered a Navy SEAL raid 6 hours later, rescued 3 hostages, and proved the brain-dead man wasn't finished. His conscious mind was gone. But his subconscious was still completing the mission. His name was classified. His injuries were catastrophic. Doctors spent 3 days confirming what everyone accepted. The man on the ventilator was empty, a shell, memories erased by trauma. But Sarah Chen wasn't any rookie nurse. She was former Army intelligence, and those 6 numbers weren't random. They were precision. Before she could second-guess herself, she dialed a number she hadn't called in 5 years. And when the line clicked, she whispered something that woke monsters. And when the line clicked, she whispered something that woke monsters. Sarah Chen had spent 3 years trying to outrun the sound of gunfire, trading tactical gear for blue scrubs, blood pools for bedpans. She had been Army intelligence, 35th Signal Brigade, specialized in geospatial intercepts until a roadside bomb outside Kandahar shredded her convoy and her belief in clean wars. The hospital was supposed to be penance, a place where the only emergencies were medical, not geopolitical. But standing in the sterile glow of the ICU at 3:17 in the morning, she knew the universe had circled back to collect its debt. On the other end of the line, James Reeves went silent. Then the keyboard clatter started, rapid and military. "You're sure about these numbers?" he asked, voice compressed by encryption. Sarah stared through the ICU glass at the man whose chart read only John Doe. 72 hours of flat EEGs, dilated pupils fixed to pinpricks, medical jargon forgone. Yet his lips had moved with unmistakable purpose, repeating the sequence 3 times as she changed his IV. She had memorized them instantly, the way she used to memorize call signs in combat. 34 degrees, 52 minutes, 19 seconds north. 136 degrees, 41 minutes, 8 seconds east. Reeves sucked in air sharp enough to cut through the static. "That is Iranian airspace," he said, "a black site classified beyond top secret." Sarah did not know the patient. She knew only that he had arrived 6 days prior via diplomatic medevac, burned beyond recognition on his left side, fingers shattered at the second knuckle, jaw wired shut under heavy sedation to prevent self-termination. The official file said construction accident in Azerbaijan. The injury pattern screamed interrogation resistance gone wrong. Now she understood why he had been kept alive despite the brain death declaration. Someone was waiting for him to talk. Reeves called back in 4 minutes. "The coordinates match a compound we have been watching for 14 months, he said, voice tight. 3 American contractors, intelligence assets, vanished near that grid last October. We thought they were executed." Sarah felt her throat tighten, the old intel analyst reflexes snapping back into place. "The family arrives at 8 a.m., she said. "They are terminating life support. Legal papers signed." Reeves went quiet. The kind of quiet that meant wheels were turning in windowless rooms that did not appear on maps. "If he encoded this under chemical duress," Reeves said slowly, "then his conscious mind is ash, but the training held. SEER protocols, survival, evasion, resistance, escape. CIA paramilitary operators memorize grids under torture by anchoring numbers to procedural memory. Even when the cortex swells, even when the lights go out, the body keeps the secret locked in the brainstem. But Sarah," he added, "if he is truly brain dead, that information dies with him in 4 hours." Sarah looked at her watch. 4 hours until sunrise. 4 hours until the ventilator stopped and the only witness to a location satellites could not pinpoint became medical waste. Reeves told her to stay put, to act normal, to let the machine handle it. But Sarah knew there was nothing normal about what came next, because Reeves added one detail that turned her blood to ice. "The compound at those coordinates is not just a prison," he said. "It is an embassy annex. Hitting it means an act of war. Unless we can prove Americans are alive inside right now, and the only proof is lying in room 412, breathing his last mechanical breaths." Sarah looked at the patient. His chest rose and fell with ventilator precision, a rhythm that would soon be silence. She thought of the contractors' families, holding funerals for empty caskets. She thought of the diplomatic nightmare, the plausible deniability, the bureaucratic hesitation that would cost 3 men their lives. Then she made a choice. She pulled a syringe from the crash cart. Not adrenaline, not poison, amantadine, an experimental neurostimulant that crossed the blood-brain barrier, sometimes used to wake minimally conscious patients, strictly off-label and against every protocol. If his subconscious could whisper coordinates through damaged vocal cords, maybe, just maybe, it could answer one more question before the end. She checked the hall, empty. The night shift was drowning in a multi-car pileup in the ER. She closed the door, she pressed the plunger into the IV line, and waited. 30 seconds, a minute, the monitor beeped steady, unchanged. Then the dead man opened his eyes. The eyes were open but vacant glass marbles reflecting the fluorescent light without tracking, without recognition. Sarah felt her pulse spike against her scrub collar. She snapped her fingers beside his ear, watched the pupils for constriction, saw nothing. Dead eyes in a living shell. She was about to call Reeves and report a chemical reflex when the lips parted again. 3 words this time, sandpaper against silence. They are alive. Then the lids drifted shut. The ventilator resumed its mechanical rhythm, and the room was quiet except for the monitor's steady beep. Sarah's hands trembled as she recorded the timestamp. 3:17:42, amantadine crossed the blood-brain barrier in approximately 40 minutes, stimulating dopamine release in minimally conscious patients. But this man was not minimally conscious. His chart declared him brain dead, cortex destroyed, upper brain functions irretrievable. Yet he had spoken with intentionality, delivering a message. She leaned close to his ear, ignoring protocol, ignoring the cameras, ignoring everything except the possibility that 72 hours of medical certainty was wrong. Blink once, if you understand me. Nothing. The chest rose and fell, the machines hummed. Then the left eye closed, a slow, deliberate sweep of lashes, while the right remained fixed. Once, twice, 3 times. Sarah stepped back, her military training crashing against her medical training with violent force, locked-in syndrome. The diagnosis was rare, catastrophic, often mistaken for vegetative state or brain death. The patient retained full consciousness, but lost all motor function except vertical eye movement and sometimes blinking. He had been aware for 3 days, feeling the ventilator tube down his throat, hearing the neurologist declare him deceased, listening to the nurses discuss organ harvest protocols while trapped inside a body that would not move. She grabbed his chart, flipped to the initial trauma report. Blunt force trauma to the occipital lobe, cerebral edema, intracranial pressure exceeding 40 millimeters of mercury. They had induced a barbiturate coma to reduce swelling, then declared brain death when the reflexes disappeared. But locked-in patients sometimes lost all reflexes temporarily, the pontine pathways so compressed that even pupillary response vanished. She checked the caloric test results. No eye deviation when ice water was injected into the ear canal. That was the gold standard for brain death confirmation. Yet here he was, blinking. Sarah pulled her phone. Reeves picked up on half a ring. "He is not brain dead," she whispered. "He is locked in. I have communication." Reeves went silent, the silence of a man recalculating everything. "Locked in means he encoded those coordinates voluntarily," he said slowly. "He is not leaking subconscious memory. He is an operative still running an operation." Sarah looked at the man on the bed, seeing him differently now. Not a victim, not a vegetable, but an intelligence asset maintaining cover even while paralyzed. She leaned in again. "Blink once for yes. Are the hostages at the coordinates you gave me?" The left eye closed once. Sarah felt hope ignite. "Is the location secure?" The eye closed twice. "No." She pressed forward. "Is it a trap?" Once. Yes. Her phone buzzed against her palm. Reeves had sent encrypted satellite imagery. Thermal signatures at the original coordinates showed unusual heat blooms in the walls, consistent with shaped charges, ambush positions. "They were expecting us," Reeves said. "The compound is wired to detonate when we breach. Whoever extracted that information from him expected him to break. They did not expect him to survive and feed us disinformation." Sarah stared at the patient. "You gave them fake coordinates under torture," she said. "But you memorized the real ones using the same technique. Blink to spell, 1 for A, 2 for B, for 15 agonizing minutes." She transcribed blinks into letters, checking and double-checking. The new coordinates came through letter by letter, painstakingly slow. 34 degrees, 12 minutes, 58 seconds north. 135 degrees, 59 minutes, 21 seconds east. A different compound 7 kilometers away, unmarked, no diplomatic status, buried in industrial farmland. Reeves confirmed it matched no known database, no satellite footprint, exactly the kind of ghost site the agency used for deniable holdings. We are redirecting the raid, he said, but I need confirmation the hostages are alive at that location. Visual or audio confirmation, or we do not have jurisdiction to hit it. Sarah looked at the clock. 5:43. The sun would rise in an hour. The family meeting was scheduled for 8. She leaned in to ask another question when the door handle turned. She spun, stepping between the bed and the entrance, her body shielding the patient reflexively. Dr. Aris stepped in, his white coat unbuttoned, coffee in hand, eyes narrowing at her position beside the IV pump. "You are not assigned to this room," he said, "and that drug was not on the evening inventory." Sarah's mind raced. Amantadine was not scheduled, not approved, a clear violation of hospital protocol that would end her career and her nursing license. "I noticed pupil asymmetry during vitals," she lied smoothly. "I was checking for seizure activity." Dr. Aris approached the bed, glancing at the monitors. Everything appeared stable, unchanged from the previous 12 hours. He picked up the chart, flipped pages. His finger stopped at the medication log. "You administered a stimulant to a brain-dead patient," he said quietly. "That is not only unethical, it is illegal. The family arrives in 2 hours to terminate life support if they discover we were experimenting on him." He did not finish the sentence. Sarah's phone vibrated in her pocket. She ignored it. "Dr. Aris," she said, keeping her voice steady, "I believe the initial diagnosis was incorrect. I believe this patient has locked-in syndrome." Aris laughed, a sharp bark of dismissal. "The caloric test was negative. There is no brainstem function. He is dead, Sarah. We are just keeping the organs fresh." He turned to leave, then paused at the threshold. "I am logging this incident with administration. Do not leave this floor." The door clicked shut. Sarah exhaled, her hands shaking now that the adrenaline was cresting. She checked her phone. A text from Reeves. The real family was intercepted at their hotel 30 minutes ago. Men with diplomatic credentials, but no State Department clearances. They were armed. The people coming at 8 a.m. are not his next of kin. They are cleaners. And Sarah, they are already in the building. She looked at the security monitor in the corner of the room, the one showing the hallway outside empty. Then the stairwell camera. 2 men in dark suits, no visitor badges, hands inside jacket pockets, moving with tactical spacing. They were 6 floors down and climbing. She looked at the patient. He was staring at her, really staring, the first true recognition in his eyes. He blinked rapidly, 3 times, then paused, then 3 times again. Morse code, SOS. She grabbed the bedside rail. "How long do we have?" she asked. He blinked twice, 2 minutes or 2 hours. He blinked once, minutes. Sarah moved fast. She locked the door, dragged the crash cart against it, knowing it would not stop bullets but might buy seconds. She pulled the emergency drug box, found the atropine, the epinephrine, anything that might restart his mobility if she had to move him. But he was 180 pounds of dead weight, tubes and lines anchoring him to the bed, to the wall, to the machines keeping him breathing. The ventilator alarm would scream if she disconnected him. The central monitor would flash red at the nursing station. She was trapped in a room with a paralyzed spy, a ticking clock, and professional killers walking down the hall. Her phone rang. "Reeves, they have compromised the elevator," he said. "I'm sending a team, but they are 20 minutes out. You need to get him out of there now." Sarah looked at the window, the 12-story drop to the parking garage, the impossibility of it all. Then she looked at the patient. He was blinking again, slower now, spelling out one final message as the footsteps stopped outside the door and the handle began to turn. He blinked the letters, TRUSTNOONE. The handle stopped. A radio crackled in the hallway, voices muffled through the door. "Package not in 412. Check the West Wing." Sarah held her breath, her shoulder pressed against the crash cart, feeling the vibration of footsteps retreating down the corridor. They were searching room by room, working from bad intelligence, but they would be back. She had minutes, maybe less. She moved to the ventilator, hands trembling as she memorized the settings. Tidal volume 500 milliliters. Respiratory rate 14. Positive end expiratory pressure 5. Disconnecting him meant brain death in 4 minutes, maybe 6 if she bagged him manually. She grabbed the portable oxygen cylinder from the code cart, twisted the valve and listened for the hiss. Then she pulled the tube. The monitor screamed. She silenced it with one stab of the alarm button, praying the central station assumed a glitch. The patient did not flinch, could not flinch, but his eyes tracked her with desperate intensity. She hooked the ambu bag to the tracheostomy, squeezed once, twice, watching his chest rise. Good. She wrapped the IV lines around her fist like reins, pulled the brakes on the bed, and rolled him toward the service door. The utility corridor was concrete and steam pipes, barely wide enough for the gurney. She navigated by memory, counting doorways. Past the linen storage, past the biohazard disposal, to the service elevator that predated the building's security cameras. She hit the button for the basement with her elbow, still squeezing the bag every 5 seconds, her forearm burning. The elevator groaned downward. That was when she saw the scar. Above his right collarbone, half hidden by the hospital gown, a puckered line of white tissue shaped like a star. She knew that scar. She had seen it in a briefing photo years ago in a folder marked with a black stripe. Kandahar, the night ambush. The asset who never made it to the extraction point. She looked at his eyes, really looked at them, and saw recognition staring back. Not just awareness, memory. "You were there," she whispered. The elevator shuddered to a stop. She wheeled him out into the sub-basement, the smell of ozone and old concrete, finding the alcove behind the electrical transformers where sound died and heat signatures blurred. She leaned close. Blink once. "Were you the radio operator?" The left eye closed. Once. Sarah felt the floor tilt. 5 years ago, her convoy had been hit by an IED on the road to Kandahar airfield. 3 vehicles, 12 personnel, only 2 survivors. She had carried the radio for her team, but the voice on the other end, the one promising extraction was 90 seconds out, had gone silent when the mortars started falling. She had blamed him for leaving them to die, but he had not left. He had been here in this country, carrying wounds she had never seen, and somehow he had ended up in her hospital 3,000 miles away, whispering numbers in the dark. Her phone vibrated. Reeves. She answered with her shoulder, both hands working the ambu bag. "We have a problem," he said. "The coordinates you gave me, they do not lead to a compound." She squeezed the bag harder, watching the patient's oxygen saturation on the portable monitor. "It is an empty field, agricultural. No structures, no thermal signatures. Nothing." Sarah looked down at the patient. He was blinking rapidly, agitated, spelling out letters. She leaned in. "Notthere. Not there." She felt ice in her stomach. The real location was somewhere else. The cleaners were not hunting him to silence a witness. They were hunting him because he was the map, and he had given her false coordinates to protect the real site until he knew she was not compromised. "Then tell me," she said, her voice breaking. "Where?" He blinked. "Sevenfloors. Up, not down." She looked at the elevator shaft. The 7th floor was administration, closed for renovation, supposedly empty. But if she was reading him right, the American hostages were not in Iran or Azerbaijan or any foreign soil. They were in this building 7 floors above her, hidden in the construction zone where the permits said no one should be working at 3 in the morning. Reeves was still talking. "Sarah, we are picking up encrypted radio chatter from your location. Multiple handsets, military grade, not hospital frequency." She cut him off. "They are here," she said. "The hostages are in the hospital. The patient did not escape from captivity. He was moved here for the termination. The family arriving at 8 a.m. is not family. They are the extraction team for the prisoners, and they are going to kill everyone who knows the building layout." The worst realization hit her like a physical blow. The ventilator she had disconnected was not just keeping him alive. It was a timer. The machine had been set to alarm at exactly 8 a.m., triggering a response that would clear the ICU for the handoff, creating the perfect window to move 3 sedated prisoners through a hospital already in chaos. She had unplugged him early, and now the plan was unraveling, and the cleaners knew it. Footsteps echoed in the corridor above, heavy boots moving fast. They had found the empty room, the open service door, the trail she had left in her panic. She looked at the patient, at the bag in her cramping hand, at the elevator that would take her back up into the kill zone. He blinked once. "Go," she shook her head. "I'm not leaving you." He blinked again, slower, TRAP. He was the bait, he had always been the bait, and she was about to spring the trap wide open unless she moved now. Sarah grabbed the gurney. She would not leave him, but she would use him. If the trackers were following his medical bracelet, following the RFID in his gown, then she would take him where they did not want to go. She wheeled him back into the elevator and hit the button for 7, the ambu bag hissing with every compression, her heart hammering against her ribs. The doors closed, the ascent began, and somewhere above them, in the darkened halls of the 7th floor, 3 American hostages were waking up to the sound of footsteps that did not belong to rescuers. The elevator doors opened on darkness, not the darkness of a power failure, but the deliberate blackness of a space hidden in plain sight. Plastic sheeting hung from exposed ceiling studs, turning the corridor into a maze of fluttering white walls. Sarah squeezed the ambu bag once, twice, then let it hang. She needed both hands to push the gurney through the dust that covered the floor in undisturbed inches, except for the fresh boot prints that marked a path toward the east wing. She rounded a corner of unfinished drywall and stopped. 3 gurneys stood in a row, military-issue aluminum frames unlike the hospital beds downstairs. On each lay a man in faded surgical scrubs that did not match any hospital supply closet. American military uniforms, stripped of insignia but unmistakable in their cut. IV lines ran from bags marked saline but likely held something stronger, keeping them sedated but alive. All 3 chests rose and fell in shallow rhythm. A 4th man stood over them, speaking into a radio in Farsi, then switching to English with a Midwestern accent. The primary package is mobile with an unknown variable. Recommend immediate termination of all assets to sanitize. Sarah froze. Termination, not extraction. These men were not being rescued at 8 a.m. They were being executed, their existence erased along with anyone who had seen them. The 8th floor wasn't a transfer point. It was a disposal site. The man turned. His hand moved inside his maintenance coveralls toward a suppressed pistol. Sarah did not think. She ripped the oxygen mask from the patient's face and screamed into the dark corridor. "He knows the secondary codes. You shoot him and you lose the location of the drop." The man hesitated, his weapon half-drawn, eyes flicking between Sarah and the patient. That second of doubt was enough. The stairwell door exploded inward with a percussive flash that turned the world white. Figures in black tactical gear poured through the opening, weapons up, voices overlapping in controlled chaos. "Clear! Hands! Drop the weapon!" Reeves entered first. Sidearm trained on the maintenance man. Federal credentials held high. But the man wasn't looking at Reeves. He was looking at the patient on the gurney, and he was smiling. "You think this is a rescue?" The man laughed, letting his weapon fall. "He is the trap. He always was." Sarah looked down. The patient's eyes had changed. The vacant, desperate stare of the locked-in victim was gone, replaced by something sharp and calculating. He reached up with a hand that should have been paralyzed and clicked off the portable monitor. The flatline had been a recording. The ventilator dependence had been theater. "Stand down," the patient said, his voice rough from the intubation but steady as stone. "Operation Anvil is complete." The stairwell disgorged more figures. A SEAL commander in full kit walked past the hostages, who were being checked by corpsmen, and approached the gurney. He did not offer medical assistance. He offered a salute. "Captain Hale, the general is in custody. Residence breached at 0430. Hale sat up, disconnecting the IV lines with the practiced ease of a man who had done this before. He peeled back the hospital gown to reveal not shrapnel wounds, but a small surgical incision over his ribs where a transmitter had been implanted, its red light still blinking. Active for 72 hours, broadcasting everything. "I couldn't tell you," Hale said, looking directly at Sarah. "You had to believe it. The security cameras were live. The cleaners were watching your micro-expressions, your pupil dilation. If you had known I was operational, they would have seen the deception." Sarah stepped back, the ambu bag slipping from her fingers. "The locked-in syndrome, chemically induced," Hale said. "Pentobarbital coma modified to suppress voluntary motor function while maintaining consciousness. We needed the Iranians to believe they had broken me, that I was a vegetable being moved to a hospital for organ harvest. It was the only way they would authorize transferring the hostages to this location, the only facility in the city with the isolation and black site infrastructure they trusted." Reeves approached, cutting the restraints on the first hostage. "The coordinates you gave us, Sarah. 34 degrees, 52 minutes, 19 seconds north. They weren't empty. Our satellites just couldn't see what was there until the sun came up. An underground command bunker. We hit it 20 minutes ago. That's why security is light here." We cut the head off the snake, the embassy, Sarah said, remembering the original hook, the promise of a raid already happening. The commander confirmed, checking his watch. The capture of the general gave us diplomatic clearance to enter the Iranian embassy compound in D.C. under the Convention on Consular Relations. We're retrieving the intelligence he sold them. 3 more hostages in Tehran are being released in exchange as we speak. Different prisoners, the ones he was trading for these 3. Sarah looked at the 3 men on the gurneys who were waking now, groggy but aware, reaching for Hale's hand as Corman checked their vitals. She looked at the maintenance man in custody and at the CIA badge Reeves pulled from his wallet. The mole had been inside the agency, selling extraction routes to the Iranians, and Hale had fed himself into the machine to find him. Kandahar, Sarah said quietly. The radio operator. Hale met her eyes. I was the extraction team that night, 90 seconds out when the second device hit my Humvee. I woke up 3 weeks later in Landstuhl. By then you had been medically discharged. I looked for you. I found your hospital records 6 months ago. That's why I requested you for this. The final revelation hit her like a physical blow. She hadn't been random. She had been selected because of their shared history, because her military background meant she would recognize the coordinates, because she would fight to keep him alive when any other nurse would have accepted the brain death declaration and let the ventilator alarm at 8 a.m. trigger the transfer protocol. She had been the key that turned the lock. You used me, she said. I trusted you, Hale corrected, swinging his legs off the gurney, standing shakily but upright. There's a difference. You were the only one I could count on to see a man where everyone else saw a diagnosis. The SEALs moved out with their prisoners, escorting the hostages down the service stairs. The 7th floor was suddenly quiet, just dust motes dancing in the sunrise, streaming through unfinished windows. Hale picked up the ambu bag Sarah had dropped, turning it over in his hands. Officially, I died on this table, he said. The man who was declared brain dead at 3:17 a.m. no longer exists. The agency gets to keep its secrets, the Iranians get to deny everything, and 3 Americans get to go home to their families. And unofficially, Sarah asked. Hale handed her the bag. Unofficially, I owe a nurse a cup of coffee, and an explanation that takes longer than 6 hours. He walked toward the stairwell, pausing at the door. The frequency Reeves gave you, it stays open, if you ever want to stop reading charts and start finishing missions. Sarah stood alone in the construction zone, her scrubs stained with plaster dust and sweat, her hands finally steady. She walked to the window and watched the sunrise turn the city gold. Below, an ambulance departed without sirens, carrying 3 men back to the world. She reached into her pocket and felt the scrap of paper with the frequency written on it. Then she walked to the elevator and pressed the button for the ICU. There were charts to file, a shift to complete, and a life to return to. But she did not throw the paper away. The elevator doors closed on a choice deferred, not denied. Sarah Chen would spend the next 8 hours charting medications and checking blood pressures in the same ICU, where she had disconnected a ventilator and changed the course of a war. No one would know. No headlines would mention the blonde nurse who recognized coordinates in a whisper, or the paralyzed man who moved nations while lying perfectly still. The hostages would reunite with families who would never learn the name of the woman who kept their father breathing in a service corridor, or the operative who traded 3 days of simulated death for their freedom. That is the nature of the deep work. It happens in the spaces between heartbeats, in the margins of medical charts, in the faith that a set of blinking eyes might still contain an entire consciousness fighting to complete one last mission. We pass these people every day. The veteran bagging groceries who once held a line against impossible odds. The surgeon with trembling hands who rebuilt a child's face in a tent hospital, nobody photographed. The patient declared empty by every medical test who was actually overflowing with secrets that would save 3 strangers he would never meet. They do not ask for medals. They ask only that we pay attention when the moment arrives, that we lean in close enough to hear the whisper when the world insists it is only noise, and that we have the courage to write down the numbers when everyone else looks away. If this story reminded you that the sharpest minds sometimes hide in the stillest bodies, and that heroes often wear the scrubs and uniforms we least expect, then stay with us. Subscribe not for the algorithm, but for the next time we uncover another truth hiding in plain sight. Because somewhere right now, in a room just like that ICU, someone is trying to tell us something important. The only question is whether we will be listening